Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you about the material world that we live in and how it affects our lives. More importantly, the life we had when our children were growing up and how we raised them and all the decisions that we made for them. I know as a parent, any big decision I made, I always thought about my son and how it would affect him. And I was always wanting to do the best thing for him. And consequently, we lived in a city. It was a small city, but it was a city nevertheless. And it was going downhill fast. And my son was just starting school. And my car got broken into. Long story short, there were drugs everywhere in our neighborhood that 5 years prior, there weren't. I know people think it's a racial thing. It's not a racial thing. Let me tell you, it doesn't discriminate with age, sex, economic status. It doesn't. Drugs and alcohol, believe me, it's everywhere. And that really does cause, I think, a lot of the crime. You know, people are desperate for money. So I made a decision, and my mom was elderly and she was living with us, and we decided that we were going to move to a small town. And I know I've mentioned this before in the past as well. So that was, you know, my son was maybe 7 when we moved there, out of the city into a small rural town. And it was very nice. It was very quiet. There were a lot of children around, though, a lot of families, and a lot of homes. Not everybody was rich, but most everybody did have their own home. And then as the years went by, there was a big area of land where they started building what we called McMansions. They were really large, beautiful homes, and they were all pretty much the same, you know, the same shape and size and everything. And it kind of dug into the hillside and the landscape. And my son, as he grew up, did have friends that, you know, lived in one of those homes. And, you know, I think about the fact that we lived in an apartment in a town, in a small town, and how living in an apartment, you know, might have affected him. Now, I never gave it a second thought, but I did have a neighbor mention it to me a couple of times that we were apartment people, and I thought, wow, apartment people, that doesn't sound good, you know. And as the estrangement wore on with my son a few years back when we were arguing, he had said that that he grew up in a ghetto. That's what he said. And I thought, a ghetto? You know, he didn't grow up in a ghetto. It was a decent apartment complex, and I think he used the word project or whatever. It was a large complex, I'm not going to lie. There were different ethnicities, which I think is great. You know, where I live, every place I've lived has been a wide variety of nationalities, and I enjoy that. And I think it's good for children to be around different nationalities and learn different cultures if they can, and have friends all different colors and backgrounds. But I look at it as, I look back, let me say this, I look back on it and I think, wow, we do live in a material world, let's face it. I mean, and children must feel that on some level, that, you know, they don't maybe have everything that their friends have. And I didn't have a lot of money. I lived paycheck to paycheck, and that's the way it was, you know. And at Christmas time, I was always juggling bills to make sure that whatever he wanted, you know, that I could get for him. I I remember the one thing I really couldn't afford at the time was a computer. And he wanted a computer, and he said, you know, a computer and a printer and all that would help him with his homework. And he was around maybe 13 at the time. And my good friend, she said, Jane, I'm getting a new computer. She said, do you think you'd want the old one? And I said, wow, my son would go crazy for it. So she brought it over. You know, it was the big clunky kind of computer screen, you know, the old fashioned, heavy, and the printer and everything that went with it. And I had the desk for it, and we put it in his room, and he was happy. He was very, very happy. So, you know, he got the computer. It wasn't a new computer, but it was a computer, and it worked. I even used it a couple of times to, I remember, to pay my car payment. But again, you know, technology has come so far since then. You know, when I think about it, it was a relic back then because it was one of those big, heavy, wide screens, you know. But anyway, I always did the best I could for him, but I think he did feel some kind of, I don't know, less than his friends, maybe. I wonder how that, did it contribute to the estrangement? I don't know. I do know that he's been extremely proud of owning his own home, because we never did. And I am proud of him for that. But I know it means a lot to him. So I wonder if it kind of left a mark on him. You know, we do the best we can at the time for our children. But, you know, we're not perfect, and nobody has a perfect childhood. But I do wonder, you know. I know that he was a skateboarder. He loved skateboarding, and I kept saying, oh, it's a phase, it's a phase. Well, no. I think today, even at his age now, he goes out in the driveway sometimes, and he's got a skateboard with him. That's how much he loves skateboarding. He loved it. But I'm grateful to it because I think it kept him off of drugs, and I am grateful for that. You know, when you have something that you enjoy and kids enjoy it like that, and he traveled with a bunch of other boys that loved skateboarding, and made me nervous, I'm not going to lie. And we did have a couple of trips to more than a few trips to the ER, let's just say. But he didn't care. You know, he went right back to it and gave me some more gray hairs, but he loved it. And with skateboarding, he wanted a good skateboard. Not the $30 one that they had at the Ames in our town. He wanted the $110 one. I don't know what they cost now. They're probably over $200 for a real, you know, heavy-duty skateboard, a real one. That the experts, the pros use. So consequently, you know, I said, if you get that for Christmas, you're not going to get a whole lot else. And he didn't care. He wanted that new skateboard. So that's what I got him. The one that I got him from Ames for $30, I think he split that one in half about a week after he had it. Because he was doing, you know, the things that the pros do, and he was using it like a real skateboarder, you know, not just pedaling along. So there was always, you know, an issue of him wanting, you know, then there were the skateboarding shoes that go with the skateboard, and they were like $80 shoes. And I was buying $20 shoes at Payless for myself to go to work in. But he wanted the $80 shoes. And I couldn't afford it. You know, it wasn't something I could just go out and buy. But he did get a part-time job. I didn't ask him to. He went out and got it. And from then on, he had a part-time job all through high school and even before that, to earn extra money to buy the things that he wanted. And I was proud of him for that, that he, he earned his own money and, he wanted to buy $80 shoes. It's his money. And I felt like, okay. And I remember I took him to the skateboarding shop and he bought his $80 shoes and he was very, very happy. And he bought it with his own money. Did I do wrong? I don't know. I don't know. I did the best I could with what I had. So I just wanted to put this out there, food for thought, that, did our kids feel like they didn't have what other children had? And did it leave a mark? I don't know. I know my son likes his cars too. It's so odd to me because I never thought of myself as a materialistic person. I'm not into diamonds and gold. I never was, costume jewelry to match my outfit. I'm a happy girl. It just didn't bother me. Although when I was working, as I got raises along the way, which I did, but I'd always buy clothes on sale. I always tried to do that. But I liked nice clothes. I'm not going to lie. I worked in an office. You're expected to dress a certain way. And I certainly wanted to do that. And, but again, I was, I wasn't buying $80 shoes. So, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Tell me what you think in the comments if you had the same kind of issue with your children, and if you think maybe it led to some kind of alienation, that, maybe they held a grudge about something that, we didn't do. I know he always wanted me to make more money, but it's easier said than done when you're actually out there working. And I didn't want to give up my job before I had another job, and I'm not a college graduate. I did the best I could with what I could do, So that's my thought for today, and let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe. People have been losing subscribers. I've lost a few myself. So please check and make sure that you're subscribed, and if not, please subscribe. It's free. It will help this channel so much. I don't know what's going on with the algorithm with YouTube, but everybody seems to be or a lot of people, including myself, seem to be stalling a bit. And we'd like to keep growing. We'd like to keep going and, doing what we do. So give it a like and do something nice for yourself this weekend. It's Friday. I hope you do something nice for yourself. Have some fun over the weekend. Do something you enjoy. And I will see you in my next one. God bless. Bye-bye.